To put this gospel reading into context, the coming reign of God will involve unexpected reversals of fortune with judgment rooted in mercy. Jesus tells a parable in which the one who humbles himself is exalted, and the one who exalts his own righteousness is humbled. The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. The gospel of the Lord. You may be seated, and I invite my young. To start out today, I'd like to invite you to get your bulletin in front of you and read together aloud verses 11 and 12, just 11 and 12. So find the gospel, find verse 11, and we're going to say this together. Ready? The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. Thank you. You can almost hear the smugness in the Pharisee's voice, can't you? But let's back up a few words to the beginning of verse 11. Did you catch how the Pharisee was standing? By himself. The Pharisee purposefully creates distance between himself and others in the temple, especially that morally bankrupt tax collector. And the space between them is intentional. It's used to draw lines, to differentiate, to separate, all for the sake of establishing who has the higher moral ground. The Pharisee is sure that he is the righteous one. After all, he is a Pharisee, a group of devoted Jews who practiced rigorous legalism, who separated themselves from others for the sake of religious piety, who followed very strict rules about praying and tithing and fasting, so much so that they would fast from water 2 days every week. So this Pharisee is exactly the kind of person who Jesus describes in verse 9. A person who trusts in himself that he's righteous and regards others with contempt. Yes, he's checking all the religious piety boxes, but by doing so, he is missing the bigger picture. His adherence to the law doesn't give him life-giving purpose. Instead, it's giving him an excuse to separate himself from others in his community. His spiritual pride gets in the way of him being able to enter into the space between himself and the tax collector so that he might have an opportunity to see in front of him not someone to condemn, but rather a fellow child of God. Sometimes we too fall into this trap. We easily get caught up in separating ourselves from the other, creating literal and figurative spaces between us and those who are not like us. Sometimes even ascribing moral high ground and regarding others with contempt. The media that we consume exacerbates this. Social media, in particular, is designed to do this. Algorithms feed us more of what we like and rely on emotional responses for engagement, pushing us further into the echo chambers we prefer, ascribing space between us and them, drawing us away from the other and further othering the other. And this is especially true in our politics. We all feel it. We're just a couple weeks away, not even, from midterm elections, and the rhetoric out there is inflammatory. Can I get an amen? Our ability to interface with one another is deteriorating. We label our political opponents not just as misguided or wrong, but as enemies and evil. Our emotions are raw, and people are being dehumanized. In this political climate, the Pharisees' prayer is rampant. Can you hear it? God, I thank you that I'm not like those other people, those Democrats, those Republicans, those libertarians, those people who didn't even have the decency to vote. We create space and we condemn, and the chasm between us widens. But it doesn't have to be that way. I'd like to share a video from an organization who is encouraging people to step into the space between and transform the ways in which we engage with one another. If you're online, our online usher will put this in the comments section so you can see this on your own, because we won't be streaming the video. Let's take a look.
Politics has always been a passionate subject, and we've always had deep political disagreements. That's the way it's supposed to be. But we've gotten to the point where people can't even talk to one another. Americans no longer see their political opponents as simply wrong or misguided. They see them as bad people whose ways of thinking are dangerous and incomprehensible. They see them as enemies. This level of rancor and mistrust threatens our democracy, and it makes it harder for us to move forward as a nation, regardless of who the president is.
The fact that we live in what feels like, some people call it a cold civil war, that takes a toll on all of us.
We've been excommunicated from a lot of our friends in the last couple of years, and it makes me sad.
This is one organization that's doing a lot to kind of overcome that and get people back to where we were, which is neighbors, friends, communities.
Better Angels was born in response to the crisis of polarization. We are truly bipartisan. From our staff to our funding to our board of directors, we're evenly split, half conservative, half liberal. Everything we do comes from the bottom up. We're an almost entirely volunteer-led operation. We wanted to see, could we get together a group of folks who'd voted for Trump and a group of folks who'd voted for Clinton and get them in a room together to see how can we bring people together to not get them to agree or to come to the middle, but to maybe change how they think about one another.
You know, it's funny, I think a lot of people would look at 2020 and argue that this is the least hospitable time for the work that we're doing, because we know that our politics has a tendency to bring out the worst in us. But it also is an extraordinary opportunity, because this deeper project of civic renewal, of healing the relationships that exist between the American people across the cultural and political divides, the importance of this project is going to become clearer and clearer to people over the course of this election.
A lot of people are going to have to let off steam. I really believe that it's better to do it in a productive way, where they see each other as fellow human beings. It inspires me. Every Better Angels debate I take part in.
When you're there in person and you have to face the person you're talking to, we remember suddenly the rules of civil discourse and kind of how we should act in society. It's something that really distinguishes this form of conversation and debate.
It's all well and good to talk about civility and being nice to people, but the missing ingredient is courage.
In 2020, we also need courage. The courage that it takes to have a difficult conversation, to put yourself out there.
What we've been saying is that this year, it's not enough to call in our better angels. We have to call in our braver angels.
The name Braver Angels captures the evolving spirit of Better Angels. We have to be willing to summon the courage to see the best in the other side, see the best in our fellow Americans.
Courage means becoming a leader in your own community who's standing up for America, not just for your political party or your tribe or folks with whom you share an identity, but standing up for something larger that we can all believe in. If we can create a large enough movement that is clamoring for a more courageous style of politics, we can change the incentives.
That's something that can only be achieved through what we call patriotic empathy, this idea that your love for your country is demonstrated in your love for your fellow American. As braver angels, we're able to lean into that with courage and boldness.
It will make you feel like we can serve this place and our country can serve humanity in a way that is actually beautiful and actually does us justice.
This is not a left-wing movement, this is not a right-wing movement, but it is indeed an American movement. We still have it in us to be champions for what is right and what is graceful and what is decent here in the United States.
In this time of public health crisis, Braver Angels is taking its work online, hosting weekly online debates, virtual book discussions, concerts, skills training courses, and soon, one-on-one red-blue conversations. As Americans stay home to protect their fellow citizens, Braver Angels is bringing us together in new ways and helping us find the courage needed to transcend our partisan differences and overcome this challenge. Go to braverangels.org, sign up to join our email list, and at the end of the day, try to treat each other with respect, empathy, and find the courage needed to talk to people, even if, and perhaps especially when, you don't agree with them.
Even if and especially when you don't agree with them. The name Better Angels, or now Braver Angels, comes from President Lincoln's first inaugural address, the phrase, "the better angels of our nature." The hope of this organization is one that aligns with who we are as Christians, that we are called to empathy and compassion and respect, that we are called to be bridge builders, called to take our faith out into the world, helping to make it a clearer vision of what God desires. Our faith is meant to make a difference in how we interact with others, not who has a moral high ground, or even trying to convince others to change their mind, but rather helping us to interact with others from a place of humility, from a place of respect. Because at the end of the day, we are all sinners who are in need of God's mercy. We are all utterly dependent on God's forgiveness and love, with nothing to claim but dependence on Christ. God gives that love and that grace and forgiveness freely to us as a gift, no matter what. We claim Christ. We cling to Christ, the one who is love in the flesh, who loves us, all of us, sinners as we are, and helps us to see others as God sees them, as beloved children of God among other billions of beloved children of God. With Christ before us and beside us and ahead of us, we can bravely and humbly enter the space between.